Have you ever felt that no matter how hard you try, there's something invisible blocking the most important areas of your life? That when it comes time to manifest money, a healthy relationship, or even peace inside your own home, it feels like there's a pane of glass between you and what you most desire. You try, you think positive, you repeat affirmations in the mirror every day, and still you feel like you're rowing against a current that shouldn't even exist. This isn't a lack of merit, it isn't a lack of effort. And it certainly isn't, that's just how life is. It's a sign that there's a layer of quantum manifestation almost nobody tells you about. Because teaching only the pretty part, the visualize and receive part, sells a quick course. But it doesn't fix what actually blocks the field. The truth is, you don't manifest alone. Every thought you have enters a field that's already charged by your history, your lineage, the beliefs that pass through your family even before you were born. And as long as no one shows you this side, you keep trying to fix by yourself a problem that was never only yours. There's an engineering behind it, layers within layers. And what's happening to you now at this stage of your life is exactly the moment when those layers begin to reveal themselves to those who are ready to see. Quantum physics already suggests what mystics have said for millennia. Reality isn't fixed. It's a field of possibilities that collapses into something concrete at the moment of observation. This means, directly, that your attention, your emotion, and your belief have real weight on what materializes in your life. But, and here's the point, popular courses usually skip. Observation doesn't come only from your conscious mind. It also comes from your subconscious, which holds inherited patterns, fears, and beliefs you never consciously chose. That's why two people can repeat the same affirmation with the same intensity, and one manifests in weeks while the other stays stuck for years. It's not about worthiness, it's about what's running behind the scenes, in the backstage of the field. And that's exactly what's about to change for you, because today I'm going to show you the real rules of this game. The rules that explain why certain people seem blessed, while others, just as hard-working, remain stuck in the same place. It was precisely by noticing this pattern, people striving alone against a field they didn't even know existed, that I wrote this digital book, The Handbook for Gods Chosen to Protect the Family. This book isn't just reading material about manifestation, it's a map. A map that shows why real quantum manifestation begins within the structure of your own family, who in your lineage carried blocks that now pass through you, which patterns of scarcity, fear, or misalignment are being repeated without anyone ever stopping to name them, and what you need to understand clearly so that your manifestation stops hitting a wall that isn't even yours. This book was created for those who have awakened enough to realize that think positive was never the full answer, and who are ready to go beyond the shallow formulas that promise results in 7 days and never deliver anything real. The link is pinned at the top of the comments, and what's inside these pages is different from what most manifestation content has been repeating out there, because here the proposal isn't to sell you optimism. It's to show you the structure. If this makes sense to you, download it now and start with the first part, where I explain how to identify in practice whether the block you feel comes from you or from something you inherited. With that first piece of the puzzle saved, now I need to show you the part that changes everything. What actually happens at the moment a thought turns into reality, and why for most people this process never completes. Pay attention to this. Manifestation isn't the moment you ask the universe for something. It's the moment your internal frequency meets a compatible external frequency. That sounds simple, but this is where almost everyone gets it wrong, because they confuse asking with intensity with vibrating in compatibility. You can want something with all your might and still be emitting, the whole time, a frequency of lack, urgency, fear of not getting it. And the field doesn't respond to your will. It responds to your predominant frequency, the one that runs on autopilot, shaped by years, often decades of emotional repetition. That's why insisting on positive affirmations without touching the root of the pattern is like painting the wall of a house with a crack in the foundation. It looks nice for a while, but the crack reappears. And the most interesting part, which almost nobody explains, is that a good chunk of these lack frequencies weren't born with you. They were absorbed From your mother, your father, from grandparents who lived through war, famine, loss, forced silence. That kind of experience leaves a mark. Not symbolic, but energetic, behavioral, hereditary. And until you understand that, you'll keep trying to manifest forward, while a part of you keeps vibrating backward, stuck in a script that isn't even yours. And that's exactly the point, where understanding family protection stops being a cute spiritual topic and becomes essential for your manifestation to actually work. Because it's useless to work on your frequency alone if the field around you, your home, your closest bonds, keeps operating in the old pattern. That's why the Handbook for God's Chosen to Protect the Family devotes an entire section to showing how to identify the patterns that repeat within a family, generation after generation, and how that directly influences your ability to manifest abundance, health, and peace. The book teaches something that virtually no popular content on the law of attraction mentions, that protecting your family energetically is part of the manifestation process, not a separate topic. Because every close bond you have, father, mother, children, partner, is inside the same field you're trying to reprogram. The link is pinned at the top of the comments, and inside the book you'll find practical exercises to map out, in your own family history, where the blockage points that weigh heaviest on you today are. Download it now, read the chapter on inherited patterns, and keep that understanding with you, because the next part I'm going to show you explains the exact moment when this pattern can be broken, and what happens in your life when it finally does. There is a specific moment within the quantum physics applied to consciousness called the collapse point, the exact instant when a possibility ceases to be one among infinite and becomes the reality you live. And here is something that completely changes the way you should think about manifestation. This collapse does not happen in the future, when the result finally appears. It happens now, in the present, in the moment you decide, with your whole body, not just your mind, that it is already yours. Most people live waiting for proof before they believe, but the field works the opposite way. First comes the internal certainty, then comes the external proof. And that is precisely where family conditioning steps in as a silent saboteur. Because if you grew up hearing, "Money doesn't fall from the sky," "This family was never lucky," "Good things aren't meant for us," those phrases didn't just stay in your memory. They became part of your dominant frequency, competing every day against any new affirmation you try to install. It is an uneven battle when you don't know it's happening. Only now you know. And knowing is already the first cut in the pattern. The second step is understanding that this type of inherited belief has a specific shape. It disguises itself as realism, as being practical, as not dreaming too big. It never appears saying, "I am an inherited block." It appears as your own inner voice, which makes it seem like absolute truth, when really it's just an old echo repeating itself through you. Recognizing that echo, separating what is yours from what was inherited, is the most important work there is before any manifestation technique can truly take effect. Without that recognition, you end up trying to plant good seeds in soil that is still contaminated by the previous harvest. And there is another layer that almost no one talks about. Spiritual protection of the family is not about keeping bad things away in the superstitious sense many people imagine. It is about maintaining energetic coherence within your closest nucleus. When a family member lives in a constant frequency of anger, victimhood, ingrained negativity, that does not stay isolated in them. It circulates. It affects the common field. And if you are on a journey of raising your own frequency to manifest something new, while around you there is this kind of constant interference, your work becomes exponentially harder, not because you are weak, but because you are swimming against an additional current that most manifestation methods never mention. This explains a lot of what seems like repeated bad luck, attempt after attempt to change your life, always hitting the same obstacle, almost as if something or someone within the very family field were pulling you back down. It's not about blaming anyone. It's about seeing clearly so you can act wisely, protecting your inner space without needing to cut ties, and instead learning to keep your frequency stable even within an environment that has not yet awakened to the same understanding you are having right now. That's why the handbook for God's chosen to protect the family isn't just about individual manifestation. It teaches, step by step, how to keep your frequency protected even within a family environment that still operates on the old pattern without you having to distance yourself from the people you love. The book shows how to identify the unspoken rules that govern the emotional field of your home, which behaviors feed the scarcity cycle without anyone noticing, and, most importantly, how you can become the turning point in that lineage, the person who finally breaks the pattern instead of repeating it. This is content that goes beyond what most materials on the law of attraction set out to discuss, because it treats manifestation as the result of real conscious work, not as a 7-step magic formula. The link is pinned at the top of the comments. Inside the book, the chapter on the lineage turning point shows exactly how to apply this understanding in practice, with exercises to identify and reprogram, one by one, the patterns that have been repeating even before you were born. Download it now, start with that chapter, and keep this understanding with you. Because now that you know how to recognize the echo of inherited conditioning, it's time for me to show you what really happens the moment a person breaks that cycle for good, and what it awakens inside them. There's a huge difference between wanting to change your life and actually breaking a cycle. Wanting to change is desire. Breaking a cycle is a sustained decision, repeated, embodied, until it becomes a new identity. And it's precisely at this point that quantum manifestation stops being a pretty theory and becomes the practice of real transformation. Because the field, the collective consciousness, call it what you will, doesn't respond to isolated requests. It responds to identity. If you ask for abundance but keep behaving, thinking and vibrating like someone who doesn't trust they'll receive, the field reflects that very contradiction back to you. That's why so many people affirm, "I am prosperous every day," and remain in the same situation. The affirmation lives on the lips, but the deep identity remains that of someone who fears scarcity. Changing that requires more than verbal repetition. It requires consciously reliving the moments when that belief in lack was installed, usually in childhood, usually through a reference figure, usually through a phrase spoken with no intention to hurt, but that was recorded as absolute truth. And here's the part that truly separates those who manifest for real from those who stay stuck in the cycle. It's not about never feeling fear or doubt again. It's about recognizing, the moment those feelings appear, that they are echoes, not prophecies. An echo doesn't have to be obeyed. It just needs to be acknowledged, felt, and let go. And there's another point that changes everything about how you'll see your own life from now on. Synchronicities are not beautiful coincidences that happen by chance. They are the language through which the field confirms that you are aligned. When you start noticing repeating numbers, encounters that feel orchestrated by fate, information that reaches you exactly when you needed it, that's not luck. It's the field responding to your frequency, showing you through signs that you're on the right path. And the more you recognize these signs, the more they appear. Because recognition is also a form of focus, and focus is fuel for manifestation. Most people spend their entire lives receiving these signs and ignoring them, filing them away as random coincidence, because no one ever taught them that paying attention to them is part of the process, not a decorative bonus. You are receiving signs right now. The fact that you made it to this video today, at this specific moment in your life when you are questioning patterns, seeking answers deeper than think positive and you're good, that too is a sign, and signs are meant to be followed, not analyzed to exhaustion. Now there's a question I need to ask you, because it's at the heart of everything we're discussing here. Why you, out of so many people, are here right now, absorbing this information so attentively? Why has this topic always drawn you in, even when no one around you seemed to care about these matters? That is not chance. There are people who go their entire lives without ever questioning the origin of their own thoughts, without ever suspecting that there is an engineering behind the reality they live in. And there are other people like you who have always carried a different kind of restlessness, a sense that there's more going on here than meets the eye. This restlessness is not a flaw. It's sensitivity. It's the ability to perceive layers that most simply don't register. And this sensitivity, when properly directed, is exactly what allows a person to stop repeating the inherited patterns of their own family and to become, in fact, the one who breaks the cycle. Not by accident, not by luck, but because they chose to pay attention where most choose distraction. And that's precisely why breaking the cycle within your own lineage isn't just about you. When you reprogram a pattern of scarcity, fear, self-sabotage, you are not only changing your own individual reality, you are altering the frequency that will be transmitted consciously or unconsciously to those who come after you. Children, nieces, nephews, future generations of your family absorb the predominant emotional field of those who raise them, just as you absorb the field of the generations before you. This means that the work you're doing now, understanding these rules, recognizing these patterns, has a reach that extends far beyond your immediate problem of, I want to manifest such and such. You are, in practice, rewriting part of the script your family had been repeating for generations. And that's a kind of responsibility that few people choose to carry, because it requires facing uncomfortable truths about your own history before you can change its course. There is a term that has been used for centuries, across different traditions, to describe this kind of person who decides to break the pattern instead of repeating it: chosen one. Not because they are better than anyone else, and not because they were born with any special privilege. Chosen in the sense of having been placed, at this specific moment in their family's history, in the position of one who sees what others cannot yet see. Every lineage, at some point, produces someone like this: the person who breaks the silence, who questions what has always been accepted as normal, who decides that the pain absorbed over generations doesn't have to keep being passed down. If you feel, even without being able to explain it properly, that this role belongs to you, that is not spiritual vanity. It is recognition of purpose. And recognizing that completely changes the way you face your own challenges. They stop being just personal problems and become the raw material you are using to rewrite something far larger than your own individual story. And protecting this position in daily life does not require complicated rituals or impossible rules to follow. It requires, above all, attention. Noticing when a thought of scarcity is passing through you and choosing not to feed it with repetition. Noticing when a family conversation is reinforcing an old pattern and choosing, with gentleness, not to follow the same script. Noticing moments of genuine lightness, saving them, revisiting them, because they are living proof that alignment is possible, even when everyday life seems to insist otherwise. None of these actions seem grand in isolation, but repeated over weeks, months, years, they become the difference between a life that keeps reproducing the same cycle and a life that finally finds a new path. It is a silent work, often invisible to outsiders, but it produces real results for those who sustain it with consistency. Maybe you're wondering, and how do I know in practice that I am truly aligned and not just repeating pretty phrases to myself? The answer lies in the body, not the mind. The mind is great at rationalizing, at creating justifications, at convincing you of anything, including that everything is fine when it is not. But the body does not lie. When you think of something you want to manifest and feel a tightness in your chest, a knot in your stomach, a tension in your shoulders, that is a sign of dissonance, that a part of you still doesn't believe, still fears, still expects the worst. And when you think of the same thing and feel lightness, expansion, a calm that depends on no proof at all, that is real alignment. The practice is not to force positive thinking all the time. It is learning to listen to these responses from the body, and using that listening as a compass to know whether you are manifesting from genuine faith or from despair disguised as faith. Despair is also a frequency, and the field recognizes the difference, even when the words used are exactly the same. This distinction seems subtle, but it's the reason so many people do everything right according to the popular manifestation manuals and still get no results. They confuse repetition with faith, and real faith doesn't need desperate repetition. It needs coherence. Coherence between what you think, what you feel, and what you do day to day, even in the small moments, even when no one is watching. It's this coherence, sustained over time, that actually reorganizes the field around you, not just in your imagination. And when this coherence is also applied inside the family environment, when you stop feeding old arguments, stop reinforcing scarcity beliefs in everyday conversations, stop validating the victim mentality that's been installed for generations just to keep the peace, your family's shared field begins little by little to reorganize itself too, not overnight, but consistently, really, measurably, in how things start to flow in a way that once seemed impossible. And going right back to the start of this conversation, that feeling of not fitting in, of sensing that something bigger is happening, that your life should flow differently than it has been, that doesn't disappear with one video or a single affirmation. It gets resolved through process, through applied understanding repeated until it becomes part of who you are. The good news is you've already taken the first step, which is precisely realizing that the game runs deeper than think positive and you're good. From here on, every choice you make, every thought you decide to nurture or let pass, every old belief you decide to question instead of automatically accept, will draw you closer to that real alignment. There's no magical shortcut that replaces this process. But there is a path, there is structure, and above all, there is the real possibility that you become the person who breaks in your own lineage, what had been repeating for generations, without anyone ever stopping to understand why. And that's exactly why I need to make you one last invitation before I close this video. Because understanding the theory is important, but applying that understanding in a structured way, with clear direction on what to do first, what to observe in your own family, and how to sustain this new pattern day to day, that's what truly separates those who merely watch this kind of content from those who actually transform their own reality. That's why I wrote this digital book, The Handbook for God's Chosen to Protect the Family, bringing together in an organized and practical way everything we've talked about so far and much more. How to identify the inherited patterns that are blocking your manifestation, how to protect the energetic coherence of your home without needing to distance yourself from those you love, and how to consciously become the turning point of your own lineage. This book isn't just reading. It's a map that shows who's playing, what the rules are that were never told to you about manifestation and family, and how to apply, step by step, everything that was explained here in the reality of your daily life. This book was created for those who have awakened enough to know that reality is much deeper than what the 7-day courses teach, and who are ready to go beyond the shallow answers that the world of popular manifestation usually offers. The link is pinned in the first comment at the top of the comments, and what's inside these pages directly challenges the comfortable narrative that simply think positive is enough for everything to change, a narrative that many people prefer to keep simple because it's easier to sell than to explain the real structure behind manifestation. Don't wait for the right moment to start. The right moment is now, because you didn't come to this video, to this exact point in the text, by accident. Download the digital book now. Start with the chapter on inherited patterns and take the first real step toward breaking, once and for all, the cycle that was repeating itself even before you were born. Because in the end, the difference between staying stuck in the same pattern and finally experiencing the life you feel deep down is possible for you, doesn't lie in another beautiful video watched all the way through. It lies in the decision you make right after closing this screen. And if you've made it this far, paying attention to every part of this explanation, that already says a lot about who you are and about how ready you are to stop repeating and start, truly, building something different. The digital book is waiting for you in the link pinned in the comments. The choice, as always, is yours,